All right, less than 1 minute now. Oh, look, no, we're starting now. Let's go. Hello, good morning and afternoon, everybody. I am Sarah Supernaw. Today we are going to go through our HUD export utility training. This is more just like a review of something that you will have to do every year and we maintain to make your lives easier, hopefully using this every year to do your HUD reporting. We have a Q&A available. And so if you have any questions as I go through, I will be going and looking over there to see if there's anything that I need to address as we go. We may not go the full hour and a half because, again, a lot of this is overview. And for those of you who are new, we're going to talk about what the most important thing is to actually getting the HUD export to produce correct information. This is me. I think I have probably talked to most everybody who's on our attendees list. I looked at our registrars list or registration, and I'm like, okay, this is not the first rodeo for any of you. So let us just get going. This again, very similar to what we have done every year. I think the first time Kelly and I did it was either 2021 or 2022. It was still kind of post COVID, and we were in the office and we did our first training on it. And so this is something we just do every year. The most important part is just to remind you that, this is how it works because it's something we generally only do once a year. And any changes that may have been made in the system since last year. So there's not a lot of changes this year. So that's cool. This is the only change that we have. And this will not really affect you unless this data is going to be there on your tenant events. Because what it's going to do on your tenant data file, when you have a household member that is disabled, where it's yes, no, missing, tenant declined to respond, that will now populate your tenant XML files. If you don't have that value populated on your household member records, it's just going to show missing, which is fine. So it's depending on how your owner agents populate their tenant events, whether it is manually they might select it or in their system they might have it selected. It's just going to be part of that tenant event and part of the XML. And that shouldn't affect anything that you normally do. So that's good. So let's talk one more time about what the HUD export utility does. ProLinkHFA has HUD data fields that we use to collect the data to send to HUD, so you have a complete reporting scenario. There are certain things that need to be configured, how we use the utility, what the required fields are, and creating the export itself. So when all your data is populated correctly, it works pretty seamlessly. So one thing I want to talk about first, we talk about this every year, is on your portfolio property that has the LIHTC program active. Again, this is your reminder that the only data that gets reported through this utility is for properties that have an active LIHTC program, meaning you are between the collection year is between that compliance program start date and your compliance program end date. On property characteristics for tab on AM characteristics, you have this little checkbox for HUD data collection. All that does is enable this little HUD export screen on your property so you can see all the data that will go into your HUD export. And it doesn't mark it, to collect it for HUD. It's going to be collecting if it's got an active LIHTC program, whether that box is checked or not. But let me, I'm just going to bring up the system over here and see if we could take a look at one of mine. I'm probably going to pick one of Kelly's because Kelly's, actually, no, let's see what we got over here. Bear with me. So I have this checked because I can see the HUD export screen. And when I click on that, I was wondering if I did click on it. I did. It's going to bring back all the data that's going to go into the project file and the no longer monitored file. If that's going to be, this property wouldn't show up in that file until the LIHTC program is over. But this shows you where all the data comes from. And it's pretty cool because you can be like, oh, okay, well, I don't have data for this or that. You can kind of hover over and be like, where do I have to put this value at? And it is important to note that Having a tax credit deal portion associated to your property is an important aspect of this. And I know that some agencies don't necessarily use our tax credit portion, but for these to get some of the data to populate, hopefully you do, because that's going to be important. And I know sometimes when we have agencies who have issues, it's because they haven't created that tax credit deal connector. So that's one way that you can look at a lot of information, because when you look at the HUD export page, it's going to show you data that lives on the tax credit fields. And then, because when you hover over it, it's going to tell you exactly where that came from. Like if your type is blank and you hover over it and it says TCA current stage, it's like if you don't have a TCA deal, that's going to be blank. So just know that going forward if you don't know that already. Some of this data comes from property, some of like low income units, things like that will come from your tax credit deal. So if you have the associated TCA deal and your property HUD export page is blank and you're expecting it to show up somewhere, this is what gets me. Is because when you create a blended deal for whatever reason, whether that was like 2 or 3 years ago, and you're reporting it for the first time, it doesn't automatically select that primary checkbox. And so you have to go in and check that to make sure that on your TCA deal, that associated property, even though it's only one, you got to make sure that's checked. I don't want to talk about how much time I spent last year going, why is this not populating? And a developer had to tell me, because that's not checked, which again is something apparently I preach a lot. So it was very weird that I didn't have it checked. Now, when you have that HUD export box selected on AM characteristics, various places on the property, you're going to see these little yellow orange bars. And that's just telling you this is data that gets pulled into the LIHTC collection. So you should have that populated. It would be important because if you don't have everything required by HUD, when you upload that into the HUD portal, you might get some errors. I want to stop and see if we have any questions yet. I'm going to guess we don't. Okay. So these are things that need to be set up in your system. And I'm pretty sure that most of you already have this set up in your systems. You have your HUD allocating agency code. That should be populated, as we generally populate that when we go live. So this will already be done once you are in our system, right? And if it hasn't been populated, you'll get an error. But I don't think this has happened to any of you in the past few years, so I think we're good. The other necessity for this is making sure that whoever is generating the HUD export files in our utility has a security privilege. Again, I feel like most of the people on this call already have that covered, but something to remember in case you have issues. There's a few things you can just check out that list. So here's my most important part that we want to talk about, is making sure that your data is set up correctly from the get-go. As you're bringing in information, or you're bringing in new deals and you're putting deals online and activating those compliance programs, and they're leased up and now you're having to report, make sure all your data at a very basic level is populated correctly. Again, these are most of the got yous. So first thing we talked about, and again, because I've kicked myself in my own foot on this, making sure that primary on edit TCA deal with portfolio properties is selected. The building on TCA deal, this is where your BIN's going to come from, and some other information. So that needs to be populated to show up on your project file. Current stage, when you're on your TCA current stage record, you need to make sure that total number of low income units is populated. And you need to make sure there is a tax exempt allocation type populated. These are going to populate your project file. And then putting in your HUD PIN and your HUD ID. Again, most of you are pretty good about doing that. Some of that information can be found on HUD's website if you don't know it. But again, I feel like our agencies are pretty good at knowing what these values are and populating those in the system when you need to. So one of the ways that when you're in the process of ending construction and starting to onboard a property for asset management, creating that program, having just like a workflow that says, hey, once a TC deal has moved into 8609 app feasibility, notify asset management to go out there and make sure that you have verified that data for that TCA deal is updated and complete. So 6 months from now, when you have to do, or a year from now, when you do the collection year, that data is already out there and you've already made that part of your process to make sure all that gets updated before we even get to the point where we have to worry about that being missing data. So for portfolio property, the data that you want to have up annotated on that is, and you probably do this anyway, is your building identification number on the building and your place in service date. These are all important things for doing compliance to begin with. When your LIHTC program's active and you're generating and taking in your tenant events, this should be done, but this is something that could come back and bite you. Again, LIHTC program for collection year. If it's a resyndication, you want to put in the resyndication data because that's going to show up now in the HUD export. You may have some, you may not, but if you do, making sure that data is populated also is very important. The big thing that seems to show up in our missing data file is when you have your tenant event submission status has not been submitted, it's set to pending. That usually shows up on that on the missing data file, and we'll talk about that in a minute. And you want to make sure that all your compliance evaluations for the collection year do not have missing requirements. And so right now at this time of year, I think 2025 will be our collection year. So hopefully, and I know this is a dream, but it's not always the reality, you've already finished all your compliance evaluation and finalized everything for the year. So obviously all your tenant event submission status would be submitted. I know that's not the case. So that's why we just kind of say, be aware. If they're not submitted, it's going to be mad at you about that. And then making sure you have an owner. And the phone number is no longer necessary as of 25, but there will be owner information in the project, your project file for projects that are onboarded, because they're going to want to know who that owner is. But yeah, you don't have to worry about the phone number anymore. So that's cool. All right. So finding your HUD data in ProLinkHFA, we talked about it a little bit. This is based on like, hey, I've got this file and I've done this, I've generated my HUD export, and I get this file that says we've got missing data, right? It's like, how do I find this? How do I know what this is? So when you download that missing data report and it brings up, there's no telling what's missing in our test environment. So this will be fun. Again, you can just take a gander here and see these are all the ones that haven't been submitted for the compliance review. Here's one where not only that, here, let me make this a little bit bigger. It doesn't have a place in service date. We have an active LIHTC program. There is no place in service date. And so that's what it's looking at. This is a reminder. HUD export doesn't care about home, HTF, any of your additional set-asides. It just cares about LIHTC. So that's going to give you, so in this case, it's like maybe we should go put in the place in service date. And the good news is that if you have already worked on your compliance evaluations, there's a 99% chance this data is already done. So hopefully, knowing how good you all are at like maintaining your data, keeping everything ongoing, you're not going to have that many missing data options, which is great. So let me bring this back down. A lot of them do, the errors that you would see on this file do get resolved during your compliance review evaluations. And as you know, once your owner agents import their XML and submit it, that tenant event submission status is going to be updated. So a lot of these you shouldn't see due to all the validation that we're doing before we get to this point. The missing data file will list the property HFA number and all that information, right? If a property has a compliance review created for that reporting year, that's where you're going to see it. Now, I know for our test environment, it's like sometimes we'll go out and use the utility to just create compliance reviews for everything in our test environment, but we're not adding anything to that. So when I tried to generate the HUD export through our test environment, I get a lot of these. And I'm not going to go back and submit them because it's fake data and I don't have to. You don't have that luxury. Your data is real. And this is what we were talking about. I brought that up again because it's always worth talking about. When we talk about the project file snippet, this covers some of the information I was telling you that we need to have populated in the system, because then it gets put into this XML file. This is for our project file. So you can see some of these where I've highlighted it. I've put, like, if it's highlighted in green, that data comes from property. And if it's highlighted in yellow, that comes from TCA. So that's kind of telling you this is where everything comes from. Maybe next year I'll have like a nice little spreadsheet that covers this that makes it a lot easier. Something to think about. So here again, when we talk about the TCA deals, the HUD pen, where that comes from, you can also create like your own data views to keep track of your HUD stuff. Is like knowing that, okay, here's my TCA deal HUD data view. I'm going to pull in and make sure all of that data is populated. There are different ways that you can help your future self with this by using data views, just to keep an eye to make sure this is populated so everything goes super smoothly when you get to this time of the year. Again, when we talk about edit property, edit TCA deal, these are some of the fields we're talking about. And then from edit TCA deal and our building records, this is the data we're also talking about that's going to come into play. Again, you can create your own data view, create some custom data views if you're so inclined. Here's some other fields, and this, we created this, so if you want to print out this PowerPoint and just look at it and use it as a part of a check. I know for most everybody, when you generate the files, you're not going to go in here and read them. We just like to show you, hey, this is what the data looks like when it gets zipped up to HUD. Because if they get back to you and say, here are some issues we have with the files that you uploaded, this helps us track down what might be wrong, what issues might have slipped through the cracks and created an error on their end. Again, as far as we know, they haven't changed anything. Sometimes, and I've noticed, I think we went through this last year, they will go out and do audits of years past, where if your agency wasn't using ProLink, there might be a lot of data that's missing, and they kind of want to know what that data is. I think we've been able to help reconcile that. But if that happens to you, just reach out, put in a ticket, talk to Jessica. We'll be able to figure out what they need to help you get that information to them if they are asking for it. So again, these are examples of the data that is required for these files, how you can create a data view to track that data. And as of 2025, this is one thing that, and for those of you who have been with ProLink a long time, you know that a lot of times it'd be like, oh, your owner or phone number is missing and blah, blah, blah. And that kicked a lot of people in the butt. It did. We don't worry about that anymore. And that was a HUD decision. So thank you, HUD, for not making the phone number required anymore. Again, ownership structure, don't have to have the owner. You do have to have the owner. Phone number is just optional. TCA current stage data, amount issued from assigned cycle, low-income units. Again, all this information will get filtered down into your HUD files. Your project XML, what else do we have here? Place in service dates. That comes from PP buildings. So part of what this PowerPoint can do, and I think we're going to send out the PDF file of this, is gives you a visual example of, a collection of data views that you can just have every year and look through them to make sure that everything is good to go, because it's going to be based on when your LIHTC program is placed in service and when it's active. And if it's the first year, it's going to be based on your placed in service date in the collection year. And if you have any other questions about how to set up data views to help you track that, reach out, send in a ticket, and we can help you with that as well. Here's some other fields that not everybody uses, but your population served data and your federal enhancement data on your edit property. These also come into play at some point. I don't think if they're missing it matters, but if you have that data, populate it. I just assume HUD is doing good things with our data and not nefarious when we report them. Now, your no longer monitored file is going to be dependent on the compliance end date of your LIHTC program on a property. So any compliance programs for your collection year of 2025 that end, they're going to show up in this no longer monitored file, right? Your tenant zip file is going to pull in tons of XML files. And as of 2025, You know, like when you download them for ProLink and they're in a zip file, you can just upload the zip file. You don't have to extract them anymore and upload them one by one. And for those of you with so many tenant event files that would come out of this, that's a blessing. It's awesome. So yeah, it'll tell you that you can just do the zip files. So be aware when you get your tenant files, zip them up in the zip or just upload them with the zip file. You're good to go. All right, so let's take a quick 10-minute break. That was only 30 minutes. I thought this might be super quick just because, again, a lot of this is reviewed. We're going to go into the system and talk more about how to generate those files and what they look like when we get back. So let us take 10 minutes and then come right back. Okay, we are coming back to continue. So before we go on, I want to go through what we just talked about because that was a lot of screens about a lot of data that probably, if it's your first time seeing this, is kind of confusing. So I'm going to bring up a property over here that I started to work on that's going to show up at least in our um, project file as one of the new properties that are going to be reported on for this year when we actually pull the HUD export. So here I am on my portfolio property overview screen. And you can see down here, I don't believe I have the HUD export. I don't have the HUD export screen available for my property. So when I click on AM characteristics, finally clicking on the right screen, I'm going to check this. So that's going to enable that HUD export page for me to take a look at. So I can see, do I have most of my data updated, which hopefully I do because I did it yesterday and it worked and populated that data file. So now I have this little HUD export. Again, this doesn't generate the export. That's the utility, and we're going there next. But when you click on HUD export, it's going to bring out all this data. Now, just in our test environment, we just default to Kansas's allocating agency name. We always have. Kansas shouldn't be scared because we don't upload data. But this just shows all the data that I have populated throughout the system on the TCA deal and on the property. You can see that I have some bends down here. I have, or my one bend, which is necessary as well. I've got that type from the TCA current stage, which is important. This comes from the place in service date on the place for a building that's on this property. This is going to calculate the number of years for the affordable period as well. This will show like, hey, for all the units that I have on this property, this is how many are the bedroom sizes. And I only put one unit on this property because I didn't want to do that much. And what's one of the other things I want to look at that we have? I have my owner information populating and my low income units. I didn't populate that low income units, which is bad. Now, for a lot of you, and I know I see some people on here that I know work in the dev TCA world. When you are populating this data and you're getting ready to hand it off for onboarding because you've generated your 8609s, a lot of this information will probably come in during cost cert phase when you're verifying, okay, how many low income units is this project going to have? So if you are the person who can populate this, you could go into the TCA deal and do that. Otherwise, people on the TCA side of the house should do it as well. But for our purposes, I'm going to go over to the TCA deal current stage. And all I have to do is click on TCA activities. And it's going to give me that link to go right over there to that TCA deal and update this data. And now I go over to current stage. And you can see down here, it doesn't have number of low income units. So we're going to fix that. And this is the field that we're talking about. This will be the number of low income units that we need to have populated. So I'm going to put 10, even though I'm lying because I've only added one unit. That's okay for just at least project level. It's just project information, not individual unit information. So now I can go back over to my property, which is probably easier just to do most recently visited. Click on this. This is set to primary, which is always the first thing I check when a property does not show up in my project file like it should. And now when I go down to the HUD export area, screen on here, now you see that we have that populated as well. But this looks pretty good to go. So when I do generate that HUD export, we should see that. So that's where we're going into, how to create it, right? This is the page. The HUD export utility page. I'm going to jump in and go in here in the system because you all could read this. You don't need me to read it to you like it's a bedtime story. So here I have created some files. I did a couple of these, I believe, yesterday. Like I just wanted to create that one project file. When you come to the screen, you have to input the collection year, and it's going to keep a track of all the files that you've generated, because sometimes you might have to generate more than one file. When you get that HUD XML validation file and the missing data file, in most cases, you want to reconcile all the data in those files so you can continue and make sure that by the time you are ready to get those files in shape to submit, it should look something like, hang on, I want to find a point where we were able to get this. I'm being told there's no questions, so I hope that means everything is making sense to everybody. All right, we'll go back to page one. So what we do, you can see that if you want to generate it, you can pick file types separately. If you just want to do the projects no longer monitored, or just the tenant file, you can do that. For this, I'm just going to go ahead and do our project file, because and then I'm going to put in my data collection year, because I feel like we are just going to have one property in that, and that was the property that I was playing with just a second ago. Now it's going to tell you you will receive an email when that is queued. This is true. This will work. So we'll give it a minute. And I believe it's just kind of looking through all the projects to find something that meets the criteria that's going to show up in that project XML file. So we'll give that a minute. I don't have my email up. It would be helpful. I won't get that email if I don't have my email up, right? And it could take, if you have a lot of data, and there's a couple of agencies I'm thinking about that has a ton of data, it could take 5 to 10 minutes for all the data to generate and finish for you to get that email. So don't alarms. Now here you can see I will bring this up just to show you what it looks like so you know I'm not making it up. That's it. Super simple. Hey, and once you click on here, it's going to take you to the screen I was just on, probably, but you can go right through. Like in case you went to have some coffee and you come back to your desk, you forgot what you were doing because it's been 10 minutes because you have a lot of data. It's going to take you here and you'll see that, hey, this is finished. Now I have my project file. Now, most of you aren't even going to look at it. You're just going to download it and zip it up to the HUD portal. That's okay. I'm going to take a look at it again just because I want to show you what I'm talking about. So here's that project that I just updated, like we're like project name, Camden Commons, and here's all the information that gets populated in this file. It's got the bin number, it's got the bin information, it has our owner information. Then we have the number of low income units we were talking about. So all of this is populated. I can't test this. We do have access to test these on your behalf to most of our clients. If you get stuck, we can go to the HUD portal and upload one of your project files, tenant files, no longer monitored files, what have you, and have that marked as a test file to help you get through this if it's your first time doing it. So please, again, if you're unsure or you get stuck, don't hesitate to reach out with a ticket to Jessica or myself. We'll get you, we can take a look at these and figure out what's going on. I don't think any of us expect you to all of a sudden become fluent in XML. We're not, we know enough to be dangerous and fix things, as you know, but this is what your project file is going to look like. So that is done. Now, if I want to generate all of them, I can by hitting all. This is going to take a couple more minutes. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to go ahead and create that export in real time. Something I want to mention that I think has been confusing. All this is a data pull. When you pull this data, you're not changing anything in the system. It's just grabbing all the data to report and sending it up. So you can generate this as many times as you want if you need to, as you would go through and reconcile your tenant XML validation, which when I started playing with this a week ago, you can see that I had a file where I had to go out and fix some things. And we'll come back to that to talk about what that's going to look like too. So you know how to reconcile some of these things. So selecting all for file type and entering that collection year, which currently it's going to be 2025 for everybody. That's what you want to do. Select which file type, the collection year, and then create export. So these are the notifications. It'll be pending, completed with errors. Sometimes you will get some errors. That does happen. When that happens and they don't make sense, or you can't figure out how to reconcile them, again, enter a ticket. Now, here's a note. Sometimes, and we've had people ask and say, I've looked at my project's no longer monitored file. It's empty because, your project file will be empty if you haven't placed any buildings in service in the collection year, or if you don't have any projects where or properties where the compliance end date is recent in the collection year, they will be blank. So if you have a blank no longer monitored file or project data file, you don't have to upload it to HUD. You can. I'm not sure if they want to see a blank file, but if you didn't, don't be alarmed if it's not. But if you are certain that yes, we had a project placed in service this year, or we had a project that we stopped monitoring this year, and you think those files should have something in them, let us know, and we'll go ahead and review it and look through your system and find out what might be missing. Okay, now we're going to talk about the file types, since we've gone through those and kind of showed some screenshots of like, hey, here's all the data that we need for these files. Let's talk about what these are for. So the first two that we have, the tenant XML validation file and the missing data file, this is just to help you get your data in shape to upload to HUD. You would not upload these to HUD. They are informational only. These are the three files that you will upload to HUD from the HUD export utility. So the tenant XML validation file is going to show you where properties and units that could generate errors when you do upload to HUD. This is going to allow you to resolve these prior to submission. One of the things that happened last year, and we talked about it in last year's training, but I wanted to bring it up again since, last year's not, we've all only done this once, so we may have forgotten. They have increased like a $4,000 limit to $8,000 for various things. So these are the kind of messages you might get. Again, like I said, for your tenant XML validation file, missing requirements, compliance evaluations should catch a majority of the stuff. So hopefully a lot of this is not going to be a problem for you. So when I go down here to what was that 2 weeks ago when I was playing around, let's see what this file says. This is my tenant XML validation. I obviously fixed all these things before I ran it again, but what did I I didn't have to fix much. I don't even know what that was. Hang on. I had something that did not have an address. I went through and reconciled it. That's not a really good example. Let's find a better example. I'm going to bring up something from last year if I can find it. Let's take a look at this one. So in most of these cases, some of them they don't. But this is test data, so your data is always way better than whatever we are using for our test data. So what this is going to tell me, it's going to bring up the property name, the associated bin that it's looking at, which unit number, because again, since this is the XML validation file, this is looking at the tenant events. And then if it doesn't have tenant events, it's looking at some of the other areas as well. Here we have non-federal rent assistance element is invalid. A value of 439,000 has been put in there, and that goes over the limit. You would probably get a gross rent error on that compliance evaluation and fix it, more likely than not. So there are certain values they can't exceed. Here's one for like last four digits of social is invalid. If anybody has updated those four values, that's going to be caught at some point on import of the XML. This was probably something we put in manually, or this is a compliance review that I never evaluated. And if I did evaluate, I didn't fix the missing requirement and I didn't fix it. But I would expect that most of our agents, you're not going to have any of these, especially because if you've already done your evaluations, you've already taken care of client import, the XML, or submitting and validating their data before it gets to you. So once you start validating your data, the missing requirements you're going to have are going to be like income limits, or you're missing a bin, or you don't have a county. A lot of these are something that are really simple that you can fix easily on your side of things. I would hope that your XML validation file will not have a lot of things in it. I don't want to save that, and I don't want to save that. So that's what we're talking about when we talk about the XML validation file. And then we talk about what else? Oh, yeah, these are just the fields that when you go into your tenant event to look at, again, this is one tenant paid rent, $200,000. This is going to be caught way, way before it even gets to that. But these are some examples of what you would see. Now, the missing data file shows various issues as well. So let me bring up one of those. It shows our missing data file. When was the last time I got one? I got one here. This was today. Let me bring that one up. This is going to be a mess. I'm pretty confident. Most of the issues I have on my missing data file is, as I mentioned before, we have created compliance reviews across the board for properties that we're not going to play with or test with. But there are some valid ones. Like you can look here, like this property doesn't have a place and service date, but it has a compliance review. And that's because, hey, I don't know what income limits to go back to, like for hold harmless, or to find out if it's HERA property, because we don't have a place and service date on this building. So that's a problem. Most of you probably already have your place and service dates on the building. But again, that is something that might fall into your missing data file. Then we have same thing, place and service date. It will give you the bin. What else do we have? That seems to be the biggest issues that we have. And counties not being set. If you don't have a jurisdiction, it's not there. If you have a compliance review that has missing requirements. If you don't have a county set, you're going to get an error as a missing requirement on your evaluation anyway. Again, a lot of the missing data things will get resolved while you're doing your compliance evaluations on your tenant event. So the missing data file you do get, if you don't get one, should be very small. If you don't get one, you should throw a small party for yourself, because that means your data is awesome because all the data is there. So let's go back to that. Right. Validation errors would be resolved when running the compliance review to get through the evaluation and then finalize it for the year. So the project XML file, again, includes the properties where the buildings are placed in service date, fall into the year, and on the collection year. And that's where we talked about the one that I had just brought up, which was for my Camden Commons. Bear with me. I apparently have opened a lot of screens today. That one. And we went over this again, but now that I'm talking about it with the slide, I want to be in context. It'll have the state allocating agency the PIN information. And I only believe I have one this year. Yes. So for me, I only have one. You all are way busier than our test environment. So you would probably have multiple values in your project data file, because you've probably placed into service and leased up more than one property at a time. So that one I would feel confident going ahead and uploading, because I've looked at my HUD export page. It looks like everything is there. I can go ahead and throw that in to the HUD portal. So no longer monitored. One way you can figure out what you would expect to see in that project's no longer monitored filer is, get a compliance program data view for LIHTC, and the compliance end date is in the collection year. I mean, this is kind of last year's screenshot. You can see what I mean. So when I bring up my files over here on my project no longer monitored, which I did this morning, we have a couple in here that are no longer monitored because their LIHTC end date is 2025. So let's just take a look. Here's two: Westside Village, Village Green, projects no longer monitored data. So if I go over and bring those two up, which I feel like I did this, West Side Village. When I scroll down to, again, you could use a data view for this, but I'm just looking at a couple. So I just kind of want to show you. I go into the compliance programs. It has one compliance program. Again, reminder, HUD just cares about LIHTC. Here's the compliance end date. So that one's done as well. And then we had, what's the other one we had? Village Green. Let's go take a look at Village Green. Same thing. If I scroll down to programs, you're going to see that this LIHTC program ended in 2025. So that's what the no longer monitored file is about. Collection years, the last year you're doing LIHTC monitoring for that. All right, let me pop back into our slide deck and see where we're at. Tenant zip file. Again, this is all your tenant data. It contains multiple files. You can upload that zip directly. I was really happy that, because I know that I had training with some people like, I have 30 files. I have to upload them all individually. And I'm like, yes. So HUD heard everybody's complaints and they fix it. So you can just download that zip file and send it up to them. Once you clear that tenant XML validation, your tenant files should be good to go. There are still some errors you might get when you import on the HUD portal. Some of those make sense to us. We've been able to figure out, and we can help you reconcile those as well. But we'll get to that in a minute. There's spoilers. Here's again some stuff that we talked about last year, the values for the tenant data file that we're going to increase their maximum value from 4,000 to 8,000, and that's what these are. So you can go up to 8,000 for tenant paid monthly rent, which I don't know why it would go up that high, but I digress. And then total annual household income from all sources has a maximum value of 600,000 to 300,000. And we also had some items that now would allow like negative value for whatever reason. So these were changes that HUD made, sent out to us last year, and our product team resolved those for the import. So here's where we talk about after you have like generated your file. So let me get us in a good headspace for what we're doing with this. Let's just pretend that we don't have this, and these are the only 3 files I have to have. I have downloaded those. Most of you know about this, but in case you're new to this, you haven't heard of it, I'm going to go through this really quick and try to find my HUD portal. So bear with me. Also, it's probably good. You should also know, if you've worked with a HUD portal at all, that oh, where's my favorites? Bear with me. What the heck? You have to log in like every 90 days or something. And there it is. You have to log in like every 90 days so your account doesn't get suspended, which I have done. I've had to get that. I've had to reach out to my caller and be like, help, because I didn't log in. So this is what it looks like. And I'm sure some of you have been here before, but I kind of want to give you some familiarity with what we see as well and what we can do. I need to look at my ID. I have it on my dry erase board. That's right. I have a dry erase board at home because I am that hardcore of an employee. 56852. No, I'm not going to say my password out loud. And then I'll accept this. All right, so once you're in here, this is what we're talking about, that you have to go to the iHab. And you can click here, click there, whatever. So when I go over here, and I just assume most of you are familiar with this site, and then I was reminded this, like, let's pretend that even though for a lot of you this is just like regurgitating things we've talked about before, some of you may not have been out here before. So we have the LIHTC data collection. So when we're talking about HUD export utility, this is exactly what we're going to talk about. Okay, so upload files and status, that's where everything is going to live. Now, documentation is a helpful place. A lot of times if I get stuck and I can't find what I'm looking for on my computer, it's going to give us more information. They will update this when they have things. and they haven't updated anything this year. All the latest data should be out here. And then, and as you can see, there's all sorts of information. And this is where, when they make those regulation changes, our product team utilizes their information. So when we go to upload files and status, this is where your HUD files are going to get uploaded. And most of you are familiar with this. So you can see, like right here, we have some things with Idaho, like we were playing around with them and helping Idaho at some point. And you can upload these as a test file when you upload a file. If you just want to test it and upload a new file, you can just click on that file and mark it as a test, and that's fine. So once you get everything valid up here, you can mark them as final. Now, as you can see, we have access to quite a few of our agencies to assist with that. If we don't have access, and I think there might be a couple of agencies we haven't, we might reach out to HUD. If you want us to, we just reach out to HUD. We reach out to my caller and say, hey, can we have this agency added so we can help them with their imports and errors and things of that nature. So I don't have any new data that might have some errors on there, but if you do get errors, they're going to show up here. And that's when you might be like, oh my gosh, I don't know what this is. That's when you would reach out and talk to Jessica or myself, and we'll figure out what's going on and how to fix that data.
Sarah, before go back to that screen for just a minute, because we have a really great question.
Can we answer it? Oh, sorry.
Yeah.
I have a cat. Okay.
So I won't say who because I don't want to embarrass anybody, but one of our attendees says, hey, listen, since we're giving them zipped files, does anybody know, can they give us back errors in a zip file? I don't think that happens. I think it's all listed right here on this screen, but it's an interesting question. Like if you had like just a boatload, do they do it like that, or is it just really kind of clunky scrolling through the screen?
I feel like Jessica might have more, because I mean, I haven't been fielding a lot of those tickets since they started accepting the zip files. Jessica might have a better answer to that. That is always something we can play around with and figure out what happens. And that would be like, again, we don't have our own like test agency. So whoever that person is, whatever agency they're from, have them reach out to me or Jessica. Let us get together and go in here and test it and see what happens. And then we can also like make edits to the XML file so it's crap and it will generate an error and see what happens.
Okay. Okay. So and if anybody else has any experience with that, please, feel free to comment in the Q&A or send emails.
I would like to know the answer to that question. So next year's training, I can add to that and be like, hey, if you upload
this is what'll happen. Yeah.
This is what happens. Yeah.
If it's a big old mess, here's what you might see. Yeah.
Yeah.
Thanks for that question, guys. That was really good.
Yes, that is a good one. And we can fix it. Whatever it is, we're going to fix it. Yeah. If you need a HUD ID, they're out there. For the project and blah, blah, blah. Yeah, there's a lot of data out here that I showed you about. Both values located. Yeah, the HUD ID and HUD pen, this is where they live. And I think this is where you can get them from, at least the HUD ID. I think that's where they get their information. So here's some of the file upload error examples, which again, I didn't want to reach out and mess with anybody's stuff while you're in the process of getting everything in there. But I have a feeling we'll hopefully be able to work with one of our agencies, somebody at some point this year, so we can like get some information about that. I don't think we have any new documentation. We might have to verify, but here's some of the stuff that you're going to get. Now, one of these things I can tell you we're not going to get. And these are Greek. I don't know if they've changed, but again, I need to go in and play around and see if the errors have gotten any better. But like type phone or something. Okay, that's usually the owner phone, right? And this like Ben and Ben address, that means there's either no owner or there's no Ben. So there's a bunch of different errors you can get. Oh gosh, we're almost done. But let me the other thing we want to talk about. Do I need to go back to the portal, Kelly? Should we go back? Let's I don't think there's anything else I need to talk about in here. Oh, what are we doing? I don't want to filter that.
I don't have any other open questions, Sarah. So
Okay.
I feel like folks are tracking okay, but
Yeah. And again, I make assumptions. I
yeah,
assume everybody has access to this. I assume that you've known that you reach out to my caller. He will get you in there. You will get your own ID. And if we
yeah.
don't have, there's a couple agencies in here I need to ask him to take us off of as well. But and a couple I need to add. But this is how we get in there and we can play and then we can test. Because when Jessica or myself is going to in here and help you review your errors, we are not going to mark anything as final. That's not our job. That's your job unless you ask nicely because you're, I don't know, you've got your fingers are in cast and you're like, Sarah, mark this as final. I'm like, okay. And I'm sure in that situation, you've got bigger problems than doing the HUD export for your agency this year, you know? Um,
Sarah, one other thing, just so that you know. One of our participants let us know and forwarded me the email. I guess HUD is going to be kind of changing that landing page, kind of the like. I assume it's just like the look and the feel of it. Like I'm
Probably will.
assuming the
It's pretty early 90s right now, so I get it.
yeah.
I get
Hopefully the
it.
functionality stays pretty well the same, but
Well,
you
my
know,
God,
again,
my
thank
breath.
you for that, and everybody beware that's coming.
Hopefully they'll give everybody a preview to be like, here's our new look and feel. Again, not holding my breath, not because my
Yeah.
collar's not great, but you know.
Yeah.
Um,
He's got a
so
lot of fish to fry. So
yeah. So again, let's talk about a lot of things I've talked about here. I just want to remind you because Kelly and I were joking before this meeting about how, like, there are times that we forget we have help text. We're like, what is that? I don't know. Wait, let's go ask the help text. We have help text for this, right? We have help text for the HUD export utility. And there's going to be a lot of information in here that you can read. I know that we all have like the patience of a gnat when it comes to like, I need to do this now. I don't have time to read this. So we've tried to break it up to make it a lot easier. And sometimes you can just, the missing data, this is going to tell you about all the files and what they do. It'll give you all the information I've talked about in that PowerPoint as well, and maybe some more, because again, I don't throw everything over there because you do have access to the help text, right? And so this goes through and shows all this information, right? Um, I don't think it gives you that. Here's the checklist to help your future self. Make sure the data on TCA is done and make sure that this stuff on property is populated, because that I made that checklist just because, again, from year to year, I'd be like, what am I missing? So that's to help keep me straight so I can help keep you straight. Um, Gives you the how to create them, what you need to do, and status and notifications of what these are. That's the basics. I feel like there's some more stuff in here. I got to find it. Uh, nope, that's the basics. It's not going to give you that much information about what the files actually look like, just a little bit. But these are, this is what happens. This is how data shows up in the missing data. And we kind of went through that. This is what is necessary for your project XML file to be populated with that property that you are expecting to see. Same thing with no longer monitored, and same thing with your tenant zip file, right? So I think that's all we have. This would be a good time if you have, whoop, why am I struggling? Okay, here we go. If you have any questions, anything at all, Kelly, oh, look, I could probably go over here and look at this, huh? If I can find my
yeah, we're
drawing.
we're okay, Sarah. Just a couple folks have gotten a chance to see kind of the landing page changes, and it sounds like it's just kind of a new landing login page, but the
I,
same functionality is there. So fingers crossed, right?
I'm going to go through some of these questions real quick. And
That's really it, Sarah.
okay. Thank you, Katie, for the mic holler. I see. Person who asked about the zip file, reach out to me. We should get together and play with that stuff. Where are we at? Yeah, last year, if you were doing your HUD export file and you weren't getting an email, that was broken. That was broken last year. That is fixed, which is why I was very happy to show you that I got the email when my HUD export finished processing. So that is fixed. do check your junk folder. My invite to be a panelist to the Zoom was in my junk folder. So I like to yell at my email client randomly. I think that's all we got. I mean, we're giving you 22 whole minutes back. But Kelly, can you think of anything that I haven't mentioned or that I should reiterate?
I don't think so, Sarah. It's been relatively quiet-ish as far as this goes over the past couple of years, and that we haven't had humongous changes, right, in the content or whatever. So, and I feel like that we've got a lot of folks who are, seasoned at it now. So, I feel like that's
It
probably
is.
a pretty good refresher.
Well, it is because I mean, again, the reason we do this every year is because we only do it once a year. So when I come back in here and look at this before we do this training, I'm like, I go through to make sure I understand how it still works. And because it's like I need help. I have to go through my own training and be like, I got to check that primary property box,
Yep.
and that's just something I like to do to make sure that everything's working as it should when we go through it together. But yeah, it's understandable if you like, I know I'm missing one thing because I only do this once a year. It's fine. Always reach out, let us know,
Yeah.
and we can fix it, go to the help text, go back to the refresher training. I feel like there's a job aid to be made here, but that will be for my future self. And I think that's it. If we don't have any other questions, there should be an ending slide, right? Oh, yay, that's me thanking you for joining. Yeah, reach out to us. I wish you luck with your HUD data this year. And um, I do hope to hear from some of you just because I like most of you. But, if we don't, that means everything's working and you don't need us. But otherwise, yes, love notes to Jessica when you need help via support tickets. That's all I got.
Awesome.
Alexis, do you want to wrap it up? Or do I just need to stop sharing? I'm sorry. I'm used to our marketing folks like entering and exiting, but I think Alexis is like, you're grown, you can do that. That's it. I'm not sure where if we have any information, we'll get that PDF.
Yeah,
Well,
I'll just be sending follow-up documents with
thank
the
you.
slide deck and questions to everybody today. So even if you have any last minute questions that come in, you can either email marketing or email Sarah, and we'll make sure to include that question in the follow-up documents as well.
Yeah. All right. See, I needed that adult. I needed Alexis to come in and remind me of that. All right. Well, thank you all very, very much. I wish you luck. And look, fall's coming. Have a great fall if we don't talk to you. And hopefully we'll see some of you at a future training.
Thanks,
Bye.
everybody. Bye.
Bye.